guys, welcome back to Home Built, and this week on the Alfarrari we are starting to put things back into it, and that's going to start out with sound deadening, which is very important. Alright guys, I just want to take a moment out to thank this week's video sponsor, which is EcoFlow, and they sent me this really cool bit of gear, which is the River Pro. So basically what it is it's a camping battery pack, but it's sort of way more than that. This unit is 720 watt hour capacity, and to you and me, it probably doesn't mean a lot these days. It's hard to get my head around what powers what, but for example, I am currently running the TV in the background of the River Pro at the moment, and it's currently at 95% charge, and it's telling me it's using 59 watts of power to run that, and it means that this will run that currently for another 12 hours. So this can run full AC. It's got two main AC ports on the side here, so I can run my TV. I can also run tools and a bunch of other stuff. For example, let me get out my drill, plug it in, and so this is a 150 watt drill that it's running. So while this is running, it's drawing, including running the TV at the same time, up to about 550 watts. It tells me right here on the readout. And obviously this is a much bigger drawer, and it drops it down. It's still going to power this for over an hour by the current charge. It can also be charged by the car. It's got inputs for the cigarette lighter type output. It's got USB, regular USB outputs, and USB-C outputs, so you can charge your phones and charge all your devices and all that sort of stuff off of it. You can also make it last twice as long. You can double the output by adding a second battery that you can plug in and last with it. It's reasonably small and portable and quite a handy thing. But the extra very cool add-on is this really robust looking solar panel array, and it's not glass. It seems like it's like a fiberglass type product. It seems really rigid and flexible, so it's not something that's going to break very easily. I used this the other day to charge this unit up from 33%, and it took me about 3 hours to charge it. So here you can see the solar panels set up, and they are plugged into the River Pro. So as you can see, the unit is currently charging at around 110 watts, and it's using around 60 watts to run the TV. So while it's running the TV, it's actually still charging the unit, and it will actually be fully charged in about an hour, which is amazing. So I go camping every year to the Bathurst 12-hour, and it's always an issue trying to run a TV next to the track so we can actually see what's going on besides just watching the cars drive past and keep up to date with what's happening. So this is going to be a fantastic addition, and the solar panels running as well will just keep us going at the track and enjoying the whole experience the whole time. So EcoFlow, there's a link in the description. They've currently got a pre-Black Friday sale going on until the 13th, where they've got up to $500 off some of the packs. After that, they've got an extra sale continuing on all the way up to the 28th of November, where some of the bigger units, they've got even more of a discount. So make sure you check them out. Link is in the description. Check it out, and let's get back to the build. Okay guys, welcome back, and I am really excited that today, hopefully we can actually start putting things finally onto the shell of the Alfarrari and starting to put it back together. Last week I did a bunch of the suspension parts and started cleaning them up and tidying them up, getting ready to put them back on again. If you missed it, I'll put a link up above so you can catch up, and think about subscribing. It does help the channel out. Now, some of you eagle-eyed viewers did point something out to me which I did miss, which I'm quite grateful for, is when I was bolting together my rear suspension arms, they look like they're completely symmetrical, and some of you said that I actually had them the wrong way around, and they should be, one of these should be towards the back and one should be towards the front, and said there was a groove in or something. I thought they meant this groove on the edge, but that's not it, and I actually had to ring up. I sat there and looked at them for ages and still didn't pick it. I'm not sure if you guys can, but yes, Tim from Zoo Autocraft, I asked him, and yeah, this side here has a bit of a groove in it, and this side here does not. And this one needs to go towards the rear because it actually clears the steering arm. Now, I'm not sure how that's going to be in my case because my steering is all completely different. I've changed everything up because I've got the steering rack instead of the steering box. But either way, these are only lightly bolted up, and I'll make sure that I get that right when I do them for the final time. The other thing that was brought up quite a bit was these trailing arms. And what a common thing is, particularly there's a similar type of trailing arm on Australian Holden Tiranas, old Holden Tiranas, that they have a very similar trailing arm. And one of the big things, they're quite flimsy on the Tirana. They box this section in and punch some holes, put some dimples in along this edge to strengthen them up. Now, I've talked to a bunch of guys as far as the Alfas go, and apparently that's not a thing. Even the upgraded ones of these are lightened because this is made out of very heavy steel. They're not actually this is not lightweight, flimsy stuff. This is actually quite a solid, thick piece of steel, and I'm not too worried about this, particularly with the panhard rod, which is holding the suspension laterally. And yeah, there's not much room where this is going to twist and buckle, and I'm quite happy to leave them as they are and deal with it if there is an issue, but it doesn't seem to be the issue that the Tiranas have on these cars. So with those things covered and out of the way, let's get into the inside, and I want to talk to you a bit about sound deadening because there are a lot of misconceptions when it comes to sound deadening about what you need, what you don't, and what actually works. So before I can get stuck in and actually start putting some sound deadening in the car, there was one thing that I didn't do before I buttoned all this up that some of you picked up and notified me of, and that was that I never actually added back in the mount for the handbrake. So when I cut this tunnel out, I had to make it bigger and get some space for the bigger tail shaft and the joints and things like that. And I never actually mounted back in my handbrake. So I cut this panel out because this panel sat down into the tunnel quite a bit because there was obviously a much smaller tail shaft. And my plan is I'm actually going to reuse this mounting piece, but sit it up above the tunnel slightly higher, making sure I keep it right over to the side. The handbrake, actually the lever that goes through into the tunnel, sits over to one side. So I'm going to make sure it sits tight over to one side as much as I can. And make my mount and get that all sorted out roughly in the right spot. It's going to be slightly further back than the original, not by much, but just a little bit, because I'm moving my center tunnel section back slightly as well. Like everything is coming back a little bit in this car just because of the size of the tunnel and everything else. So let's cut a little hole and start making up my bracket and see if I can sort of make a mount that sits nicely into the tunnel and get to do a little bit of welding again. I haven't done some welding for quite some time. Alright, so you can see here that there's actually a center bolting point for the tail shaft, which is perfect because that's what I need. I've just got it propped it up on a couple of bits of timber either side so that I've got it sort of reasonably in its correct place. And I've cut my window through because the arm of the handbrake has to go through that hole, and I have to make sure I've got enough room so it doesn't hit either side. It's quite a tight gap that I've got here, but I think I can make it work. So let's get it in there and see if I can get enough clearance to do what I need. All right, so this arm needed to clearance out a bit wider so that I could get it around the tail shaft. All I've got is MAP gas, which is not the right stuff. This doesn't get hot enough. In some ways, I should get myself some oxyacetylene. It's just something I use so rarely, but when you want to try and bend something like that, you really need to heat it up to glowing red hot. This stuff is it's just not hot enough. So, but it did the job. It got the clearance I need for this particular job. This is cast, so I'll keep an eye on it. It may have weakened it slightly. I've noticed that there is actually the little stopper for light switch is welded on as well. So this, obviously bits of it are welded. We'll see how it goes, but I think it should clear now, so let's go and finish making them out. All right, a bit of time spent with my ram board to make the shape I need, and I've got this weird little cup, but this sits the gear stick up just at a nice height, so and it still opens and closes at a nice location, because obviously you have to make sure that the travel of the arm inside doesn't touch anything, and it also it's going to clear. The center console is probably going to change a bit, but at this stage, this clears, it sits in a nice spot. It's almost the same distance as it was originally, so it should be easy enough ergonomically to use when I'm sitting in the seat. So I think that is perfect. So now we're going to take these cardboard bits out, cut them out of some steel and mount them into place. All right, so I've roughed out my very odd looking shape and just tacked it together. There's gaps around the edge and stuff like that I'm gonna have to go around, tap in. I can plug weld these holes and get this right. But first of all, I've got to get it back in the car and then start tweaking the shape so that it sits in perfectly into the tunnel. right, well, we now have the handbrake mounted in. It took a little bit of finessing to get it to fit in there and clear the tail shaft, but now it all clears. There's room where it sort of slides along the side. This is obviously sitting higher than it was before. I've got something coming for the center console, so this is not going to sort of protrude or anything like that. That is something I still need to work on in the future. So now that is done, we can finally move on to the sound deadening. All right, so I'm sitting in the back of the Alfarrari, and one of the most important things, particularly I think on a resto rod, on a car that you're going to drive on the road, you want to put some sound deadening in it. And I actually did a lot of research into sound deadening. It actually turns out it's about 6 years ago now, when I was doing Harry my 911. There's a lot more to it than what most people think. Most people get something like this stuff here and just cover it everywhere over the car and think that's going to do sound deadening. And this is only a small part of the story, and it won't actually... I know lots of people who've done this. They put this down, they put carpet down, they go, why does it sound so loud? Why is it nothing like a modern car? That's because there's a lot more to sound deadening than just this stuff. So when I did my 911, I did my own independent research, and I found Car Builders, which is an Australian company, that I used their stuff on my car, and it wasn't sponsored or anything. So when I came to this car, I thought I'd reach out to them and get all the right information to pass on to you guys, and I was really happy with their products and that, so they are happily wanted to supply everything for this build, so I'm very grateful to that, and I want to try and dispel some of the myths. So again, this is not the be-all and end-all. Yes, it's part of it, but only part of the deal. So what is this stuff for? This is actually butyl rubber. It's got a foil covering on it. There's lots of different brands out there that people put on the cars, and basically this is only really to stop the drumminess of a panel itself. So you can hear the vibration of the roof. It dulls the vibrations of the panel, but it doesn't actually stop a lot of the noise transfer through the car. Generally in the middle of big solid panels, anything that's double skinned or in seams and stuff like that, this is not really going to do much because there's not much vibration in that anyway. It's the big flat panels where this stuff comes into its own. In theory, all you actually need is to cover about 50% of a large panel to stop the vibration. That said, talking to the guys at Car Builders, this stuff does actually provide a little bit of heat insulation. They measured it at about 6 degrees, so I'm going to cover the entire firewall in it. So that's the first thing I'm going to tackle now, is to get in here and start trying to tuck it up in the firewall and get a reasonable coverage of this stuff to the forward edge, just to try and keep some of that V8 Ferrari heat out of the interior. Alright, so I've spent a fair bit of time now going through, and I've done the entire firewall. So it's got a nice solid foundation over the entire area. A lot of it, this will reflect a bit of heat, like I said, about 6 degrees, just with this layer. And it's got a good coverage over all of here. I went around and trimmed out all of the holes where I'm going to have hoses and electrical connections, and the power steering and things like that are going to go through there. As far as my removable tunnel window goes, I'm going to put a strip on the back of the tunnel, but obviously leave the gap around the edges. It's all double thickness there, so you're not getting a lot of vibration through those areas. So just working my way around now and finishing off the sort of lower part of the car. Takes a bit of time, but it's oddly sort of therapeutic. right, so you can see here I've done the entire firewall. I've got that all done like I showed you before, and now I've gone through and done all of the floor, even inside my my hatch, the floor and the rest of the back hatch and stuff. As you can see, I haven't done 100% coverage because, like I mentioned, it's not actually necessary. Because basically, like things like this, that's solid. It's not drumming anyway. So now I'm going to put some panels and put them inside the doors to dull that out and hopefully muffle a little bit of the vibration from them as well. All right, so you can see I've put the sound deadener on the roof. It's really dulled down that drumminess of the roof skin. One thing to note of putting this on is on a cold morning, if the car's outside and it gets sort of dew on the top, you will see the shapes of the sound deadening through that. It's not a big deal, I don't really mind, but just with that in mind, I tried to keep things nice and even and sort of evenly spaced, so there's even gaps and things like that around the front ones. The rear is a little bit narrower, so I did to trim them out, but I've kept it pretty much symmetrical and it's looking good. Okay, so you can see now that I've gone back in and fitted my custom air conditioning and my heater box back into the car just to make sure that it's still all fitting the way it's supposed to and I still have space. When any of you who've sat and driven in old cars will just know how much louder everything is in the old car, particularly if you go back to back with a modern car. Modern car sound deadening has gone leaps and bounds. They've got teams of people studying the acoustics in the cars to get them quieter and just more comfortable on the road. Now, that is where you really need a good 3-layer sound barrier. And what that means is this stuff absorbs the drumming vibration out of the panels, but to really absorb the sound, you need mass-loaded vinyl. And this is sort of a heavy layer that will absorb the noise. But you also don't want it sitting preferably straight onto the panels because it can still transfer the vibrations through. So that's why you usually insulate it with a layer of closed cell foam first. So you have the butyl rubber, then you have closed cell foam, and then you have the mass loaded vinyl. And that's where car builders do this mass sound deadener that's already got the closed cell foam on the back of it, so you don't actually have to sort of put the closed cell foam and separate it out. And basically all this foam does, it's not a huge sound barrier by itself, it's more just an insulating layer to keep it separated, keep the mass loaded vinyl separated from the car, separated from that vibration just going through the vinyl and transmitting the noise. And what you really want to do is try and get the mass loaded vinyl sealed up all over the surfaces of the car that you can get to. It's always a compromise of where you can fit it, where you can, I still need to fit panels and things like that, so we just have to see how we go with that. But ideally you want no gaps, even a little join in the corner. The sound will come through the join, so it will do whatever it can to get into the car, and it's our job to stop it from getting in here. So I'm going to go through now and start making some patterns up and start laying out areas of the mass-loaded vinyl so that I actually have these nice sheets all through the base of the car to absorb that noise. Coming up behind the heater and stuff, there's not enough room for the closed cell foam mass loaded vinyl. It's too thick, it's too bulky, it's not going to do the job. But that doesn't mean I can't have stuff in there. Car Builders also has this stuff which is still the mass loaded vinyl for parts. Like, they generally recommend it for things like behind the back seat and things like that, where you can't actually get that full thickness of closed cell foam, but it has a bit of this cotton backing on it. You still have the mass loaded vinyl in here. So on these really tight sections, this is the stuff I'm going to use, and I'll still get it in across the back of the the dash and underneath, so I still have that that sound deadening barrier. It's not quite as effective as having the closed-cell foam, but it's better than not having it all. All right, so I've gone through now and I've got the mass-loaded vinyl on the whole firewall all the way along, and this is a really difficult fiddly bit. You know, getting in there, trimming around some of the mounts I have for my ECUs and things like that, around the pedal mount and all that sort of stuff. I have left space here where the bulkhead connectors and their breather hoses go through. They go through from up there to across there for the dry sump tank. So there's bits and pieces that I've left out, but that is going really nicely, and we actually have mass-loaded vinyl covering the most difficult part, which is the firewall. It is so good to finally be putting stuff in the car that is hopefully staying in the car. I'm sure there's things that I've covered up that I shouldn't have, and holes I've got to make, and things that are going to get in the way. So I may be tweaking as I go, but essentially the bulk of this stuff is definitely not coming out. It is staying in here, and it's just going to be getting more and more stuff going back onto the car again, which I'm so looking forward to. All the car builded stuff, fantastic gear. There is a link in the description. I love it in Harry. As I said, I've had it in there for 6 years, and that's why I reached out to these guys when it came to doing this, because I knew I wanted to do this 3-layer system even better. And so talking to them, I'm sort of making sure I'm getting things right, and there's a bunch of different things that I'll still continue on with next week, but we have run out of time. So I think that means it's time for Fun Facts with Mrs. Jeff.
Hey guys, 1987 saw the release of arguably the most coveted road-going Ferrari ever, the F40. As early as 1984, Ferrari began toying with the idea of fitting their monstrous Group B engine into a road-going car. However, when Group B was banned in 1986, Ferrari was left with 6 288 GTO Evoluzione development cars with nowhere to race them. Enzo gave the go-ahead for the F40 with a very short 11 months to release it for sale. The F40 was a very simple, Spartan car for the road, compared to its competitor, the Porsche 959, which was high-tech and refined. Ferrari planned to build a total 400 units with a retail price 5 times higher than its predecessor, the 288 GTO. Ferrari easily eclipsed that number, with speculators buying and flipping the cars, predicting that Enzo Ferrari's imminent death would raise the price. Cars continued trading up in price, reaching up to 7 times the list price, until the bubble burst in 1989. And by the end of its run in 1992, a total of 1,315 cars had been produced. They were all officially left-hand drive cars, although at least 7 were converted to right-hand drive and painted before they were delivered to the Sultan of Brunei.
All right, well, I am very happy with the progress getting the sound deadening started. I wish I'd got it all done, but forgetting to put that handbrake in earlier did delay things a little bit, but that's fine. It's all coming together, and more of it's going to have to get done as I go through and trim and do the door trims and things like that. So we'll do some more next week and just keep moving forward. But I think it's a very important part of the car. It does
the handbrake.
Well, the sound deadening.
Oh,
yes,
well, yes.
Both.
both are important in their own ways.
The sound deadening really makes a difference, and yeah, it's one thing to make a really cool looking race car with a nice painted interior and stuff, but if you ever drive one of those things on the road, they are horrible. Like having nice sound deadening really makes it a usable car.
Yes. Excuse me. Sorry.
Okay, right.
Like and subscribe if you haven't. And if you want to follow Jeff a day early with no ads, but just so extra Jeff talking time, follow him on Patreon. And yeah, he loves reading your comments, so let him know what you think. And
we'll see you next week.
Yeah, see you next week.
All right, guys. See you later.
Bye. Of arguably the most coveted road Ferrari.
Yes.
Oh, that was right. I didn't think it was. Road going. It's like,
yeah, that's right. Yep.
Ferrari was left with 6 GTO development Evoluzione cars with no its predecessor, the GTO 288.
No, the 288 GTO.